Welcome to Curiosity Unleashed with one of my favorite, definitely favorite acupuncturist and favorite Wisdom Seekers members that's been with us for forever. She's always been part of us, even before she joined. Dr. Janice Campbell, thank you so much for joining me. I'm very happy to have you. I'm going to let you introduce yourself because
Oh dear.
I can't touch on all the points.
I'll try to be brief.
Yeah.
I like to say that I'm a recovering theatrical stage manager. I spent the first 15 years of my adult life stage managing, and about 20 years of my life total in theater. Um, and I have my doctorate in acupuncture and herbal medicine. I am also a somatic touch practitioner. I do an online service, I guess, for people called distance mind body integration, and which is to some degree an acupuncture treatment using story and somatic meditation. Um, and I also do that for groups, both online and in person. And I do a fair amount of speaking things. Oh, and I have the podcast. Um, oh yeah, that. Um, that's why I'm here. I've begun doing recordings. I did a little 10-minute recordings. What I thought was preparing people for the holidays last fall, and then here in America, the election happened, and people are using it for all sorts of things. But they're little 10-minute meditations under the title "Calm Amidst the Chaos," and my vision was that like people would be sitting in a dressing room, while shopping and
Yeah.
away from their family, to do a 10-minute meditation so they could get back out there, or, in the bathroom with their in-laws, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then also I had done a piece. I have another bigger podcast that is it's a private podcast, but the first several episodes are going to be free, or they are free as they release. And it's called Once Upon a Moment, and it is something that I created for my patients during quarantine. That I have a ridiculously large children's book collection, and I would read them a story, and then I would do a guided somatic meditation out of that based on one of the themes of the story. And one of my patients actually told that she had a weekly whole company meeting on Wednesday mornings, and she'd say, "I'm going to be 30 minutes late every week because I'm not missing story time." And all of her coworkers, rather than getting mad, all said, "Ooh, can we come? We'll move the meeting." So I started creating it for the public, and then all the publishing houses put their copyrights back in play.
Yeah.
And so I've spent the last couple of years collecting out of print stories, teaching stories that I use in my practice, fables, that kind of thing. And now I'm doing it for the public.
Yes, and I love them. I have to kind of just butt in here and tell more about this because it's
Please.
really cool. The third one came out today. By the time we're going to publish this, there'll be more. So they come out every Wednesday. You can subscribe for $81 a year. So that's 52 every week. On a Wednesday you get a new one, and the first three are for free. And they're at the moment, and they're beautiful stories. I mean, I love the one, all of them, obviously. The first one about the, steps.
The big jump.
The big jump, but it all comes down to that. And then the story of the horse, and the farmer and the horse.
The big jump.
Oh, there you go. And then the story of Valentine that came out today.
Oh, my dog. Yes, my dog.
Yeah. So it's it's relevant to us. All stories, most stories, I think, is such a beautiful way for us to really connect to wisdom in a playful way, because this is how our brains work, or most of ours. We connect to themes. I love myth. Myth is story. That's kind of, I feel, a psychological, like a collective unconscious psychological point of understanding ourselves, and stories bring that to us so beautifully. And your voice, obviously, because you have this calming, grounding. I was listening to it this morning, and I was sitting in front of my computer, and I just automatically went back, and I think it's like conditioned.
That's if you ask people who worked with me as a stage manager, they would have not have said Janice as a calming voice. Um,
No, but
not
that was
because
a
I was
different
not
setting.
because I was mean, but because I was loud.
Yeah,
I'm the person that, oftentimes in a room full of people will try to hand me a microphone, and I'm like, actually, that's probably not a good idea. Just let me be loud.
yeah,
Um, and I mean, people learn through. There's Western science has done lots of research on the fact that people learn better through play and story,
yeah,
and they remember information through story.
yeah,
And and one of the goals of this once upon a moment thing too is that I, in case you haven't been keeping up, here in America, everybody, lots of people are in fight or flight, and there's things changing every day, and we're all trying to navigate it. And I, this isn't just about coming and listening to a story and relaxing.
yeah.
It's about reconnecting to our inner resources, reconnecting to our inner equilibrium, our inner sovereignty, and being able to have the resources and the stamina to do the work that's in front of us. And
Mm.
so, while it's like, it may seem frivolous to come and like listen to a story, and it's only 15 minutes,
Yeah,
plus
the whole thing.
plus
I
or
mean,
minus.
story and meditation is only
Yeah,
about
is
15 to 17 minutes.
yep.
Yeah,
And so, but taking that time to reconnect with your physical self, and also the places that you're carrying different stories in your body,
mm.
um, and to really come in relationship to what is really important. In fact, actually, I just came across. Well, I knew the story, but I forgot about it until I was looking through all my books. But I came across an Ojibwe tale um, called Shingabus, which I believe I'm pronouncing correctly. And I've actually even said in the recording, if I'm not, tell me please, and I'll re-record the whole thing. Um, but it's a story that speaks specifically to this.
Mm.
It's Shingabus is a little wood duck, and it's winter, and he's going about his life as though it's no big deal, and the north wind gets mad at him because he's not afraid of him, and Shingabus just keeps doing his thing, and and building resources and all of that. And I think it's the perfect story for right now. And so I'm hoping to do that story, even maybe in like a YouTube video or something that I can put out across the web just as a gift.
Yeah,
And then, if people want more of that kind of thing, then
and you
they
can.
can get, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think story also gives us perspective. You know, it kind of makes us stop our own story that's going on in our head, because a lot of how I feel we perceive life and the world, because it's a messy place. A lot of it is happening within ourselves.
Yeah.
How we think it might turn out, or
Right.
or where it's coming from, all of that. And just to pause and kind of let go. I think in your description, on Hero, you also say kind of, we have all these things. We have our imagination. We have
Mm-hmm.
our body. We don't need to go out and get stuff to understand or enjoy a story or the moment, or just reconnecting to the back of our bodies, kind of, thing. It's there, but we are
Mm-hmm.
always out here. And it's really empowering for us to kind of stop and just go, hang on a minute, I am here, and I can play with my imagination, um, in this audio way, which is
Yeah.
also very nice, that there is no visual, that all the visual is within. It's how
Yes.
you create it and see it.
Well, and it's not even, I mean, I like to say, you know, all of the work that I do, whether it's with acupuncture needles or herbs or words or presence, is or touch with the somatic touch work that I do. All of it is helping people tell stories big enough to live in,
Yeah.
because uh, we when we're small, if as long as we have a safe and healthy situation,
Mm.
we are connected to the world in a very full body way.
Yeah.
And then as we get older, we start ignoring all the things that our body tells us, like don't go over there and talk to those people, or that's not
Yeah.
good we shouldn't drink that, or whatever it is. And we start overriding all those things and
Yeah.
ignoring it because of an idea, because of a story that either
Mhm.
we've told or that we see that we've made up by watching other people, or that other people have told us.
Mm.
And I like to say that, then by the time we're, probably teenagers, or maybe even younger now with everybody being on screen, we evolve as humans to believe that everything from here down is here to carry our head and our hands around. And
Yeah.
then we wonder why everything is arguing. and 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 being able to open those stories back up,
Mm.
because our we're still responding to the world full body.
Yeah.
Well, and when I say full body, I mean all the densities of us. This
Yeah.
body mind spirit thing is an artificial division. It's just different layers of density.
Yeah.
um and you know when I was in acupuncture school years ago, the University of California at Irvine was doing some research into it, and they noticed that when people were happy, the chemical makeup of the cells in their toes changed.
Oh
And so
wow.
our whole bodies are still responding to the world the way they did when we were small, when, our whole body was hungry, our whole body was happy, our whole body was sleepy,
Mhm.
and um, we just act like it's not. And
Yeah.
so reintegrating it, that's why I came up with the um, distance mind body integration,
Mm.
because it's really all there. Um, we're just not listening to everybody at the table. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. And we're interrupting. I mean, when you were talking now, we're interrupting um, our uh, intuition, for lack of a better word,
mhm,
now.
yep,
What we need, what we know we need, our inner wisdom, because we know these things. But I mean, going to school, you have to ask permission to go to the toilet, right? And
right,
this is something that is quite a human function that you should have your own choices over. So,
sure,
in essence, for me, we are being conditioned into I am separate from my bodily needs, really.
right,
Yeah.
right, right.
Um,
And I mean, I think one of the most striking things that you can find stories about this in Western medicine all the time is when people have heart transplants,
yeah.
their favorite color changes. They suddenly like chocolate instead of vanilla.
Mm.
They like baseball all of a sudden. And
Yeah.
it almost always is an echo of who had the heart to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Western medicine is like, isn't this weird? We don't know what to do with this.
Yeah.
Although they are beginning to realize, I mean, research has started to show that the heart has its own network of connection to the whole body and is in communication with the whole body.
Yeah.
And I mean, in the medicine I practice, we're like, us,
Finally.
all the traditional medicines from around the world are going, yes, if you'd asked us, we could we could have told you this.
Yeah.
Um, and and the way I put it in my own storytelling way is that in the medicine I practice, the mind is considered to be in the heart.
Yeah.
Any mental illness is a heart imbalance. Um, but the brain is like a high paid legal assistant. It's
Yeah.
really good at some things and it should be in charge of some things, but it should not be in charge of the whole show. It's working
No.
for the heart. And
Yeah.
all of this head to toe
Mm.
is here so the heart can experience the world. And
Yeah.
so um and I like that story. I like the way we can uh tell stories even about our health, and even about the like one of the ways I was trained was to help people before we get rid of symptoms.
Mm.
We talk we work with the patient to figure out what the symptom is getting their attention about. What's it trying to teach them?
Mm.
And for example, I've had migraine headaches since I was very small, but I didn't actually get diagnosed with them until 2019. But that's another story. Um, and what I know now is that when my eyes get a particular kind of dry,
Mm.
if I don't take a couple of things off my to-do list,
Mm.
be lazy for a couple hours one afternoon, get extra sleep,
Not
drink.
lazy, be.
Right. Well, but
Lazy is
to
the
be
story.
but lazy's not necessarily a bad thing. It's
Yeah.
all things in moderation. Activity, laziness, all things in moderation.
Yeah.
And, get more sleep, then within the next 24 to 48 hours, I'm going to have a migraine.
Yeah.
And so what my symptom is doing is saying, listen,
We need to talk.
we know that you can do a lot of stuff, but let's
Yeah.
not, And so being able to back it up to what's that very first thing, that
Mm.
very first light on the dashboard, if we're talking about ourselves like machines, which we're not, we're
Yeah.
like gardens, but what's that? And pay attention to that so that we can then take care of ourselves in a way that, and that's not to say that there aren't symptoms that show that we're not aware of until they need intervention.
Yeah. Yeah.
A cancerous mass is something that needs intervention.
Yeah.
A brain tumor is something that needs intervention if
Yeah.
possible. And how many of those things would not manifest? I mean, I don't know the answer to this question, but how many of those things would not manifest themselves if we had paid attention to the little things along the way and listened to our bodies a little? And none of us get out of here alive, mind you. We're all going
Yeah.
to end at some point. And how many things could we have avoided if we were paying attention?
Yeah. And what I'm hearing is that in the medicine that you practice, the body tells a story, and for us to kind of pick up that story, um, to look at the whole picture,
Yeah.
because these symptoms or disease or whatever it is part of that story,
Yes.
before we transition, because maybe we don't just end. I
Yeah.
hope.
Well, I mean, but we end in this version,
Yeah, this
right?
version of us. Yeah.
And and that's true in every medicine.
Yeah.
That's true in Asian medicine. That's true in traditional Western medicine. That's true, in South American medicine. That's,
Mm.
it's true in everybody's medicine that the body is telling a particular type of story.
Yeah.
Now some versions of medicine, and we're all just talking about our piece of what we see. There's nobody that has the whole right answer.
Yeah.
That's why I like the word complementary as opposed to alternative. And each one of us is, some medicines are telling the story of a human being as, well, let me back up. In science, light is both a particle and a wave.
Mm.
And it acts as both, but sometimes it acts as both, but often it acts as one depending on what situation it's in.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the environment. Yeah.
And in some medicines treat the body of the human like a wave, and some medicines treat the body like a particle, but you can't actually treat the particle without affecting the wave, and you can't treat the wave without affecting the particle. And so it's it's endlessly fascinating.
Yeah.
And how those play out together.
Which comes back to that densities that you spoke about, the body, mind, spirit, and yet they're all part of the you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do we tell those stories? And play. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
in play, we get to embody story,
Yes.
and to let go of all this stuff that kind of brings us into this static way of thinking we need to be, in the world.
Which brings up the concept of what words we choose to describe ourselves.
Yeah.
And if you ask any of my patients or my clients, they'll at some point I've said to them, they'll say, oh, I'll say, experiment with this and see if that helps. Run with this for a week and let me know how it goes. And they'll say, okay, I have to put that on my calendar. And I say, you don't have to put it on your calendar. and they'll say, well, I need to do this. And I'm like, do you need to do it? I said, I'd rather you play with it. I'd rather you play with it and see whether or not you guys get along, if it's a thing that works for you or not.
Yeah.
And when you think of, I'm going to play with eating more vegetables and see how it goes, is different than I have to eat more vegetables.
I'm not going to.
Or I need to eat more vegetables, or whatever the thing is, right? And so the words that we choose to describe being alive also affect how we carry them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the Yoda who stole it from Lao Tzu, or his writers stole it from Lao Tzu. It's not Yoda's fault. Is the do or don't do, there is no try. When you say you're going to try to do something, that creates a story in your body where your body's like, oh, we're doing it, but we're not doing it. How are we? And if you do enough, if you lay enough tries on yourself, then your shoulders hurt, and then your low back hurts, and then you get a headache more often, and then because everything's trying to do and not do at the same time. Whereas I'm going to play with this and see what happens. I'm going to experiment. I'm a beginner at this.
Which gives room for possibility as well, because in this playfulness I can now, which vegetable am I going to play with? There's choice, and there's possibility, and there's movement in a way, which is exciting, because don't tell me what to do. I'm going to completely shut off, and I'm not going to do it.
Right.
But tell me to play, yes, thank you. I'll take you on that.
Give me a new box of crayons, but don't tell me what to draw.
Exactly. Or what color to use, or any of that.
Right. And that goes back to telling a story big enough to live in. Because we all often have all these woulds and shoulds and needs to, and I mean, and there are actual needs, obviously, eating, sleeping, shelter, community.
But they come kind of naturally, if you allow them.
Right. But all these stories that we say, I'm not good at that, I can't, or so I'll never be so-and-so, or all of these put us in tighter and tighter boxes that are just not big enough to live in, at least not in a healthy, happy sort of way.
No. And I think we as society, humanity, whatever you want to call it, are evolving, because we have to, because we can't live in these boxes. We can't have these labels and limit ourselves constantly and try and fit in and do all the stuff.
Well, actually, technically we can, because we have been, but it's not comfortable.
I don't want to. So we put it that way. And I think there is, according to me, an evolvement of how we show up in the world, because we want to experience living instead of should have or whatever it is, because surely there's more to choosing to be in this form than to have to do anything in a certain way. If it doesn't fit, because the body also tells you when things aren't fitting, when things isn't where, it's like a plant that's not planted in the right place. You notice it quickly, and you can feed the plant whatever you want, but sometimes it needs more sunshine, or lots of more sunshine.
Well, and this applies. I mean, when you talk about play and you talk about storytelling, people are thinking, yes, that's for the folks that work in the arts, or have a liberal arts degree, and that's not true. I mean, I know people that play at coding, and really love it, and it's like a puzzle, and they have a great time, But it also applies to things like doing your laundry. If every as I tell my patients, at the end of when you die, there will still be dirty laundry unless you die naked and have just done a load. And the story you tell yourself about the chore that you have to do to be, to live in an environment you want to live in, and makes a big difference. Like when I was stage managing, I would get really angry when the kitchen got crazy dirty, and I would be, and all the dishes were dirty and all the silverware was dirty. And, nobody in the house was cleaning it, and I would lose my mind, and I would but at the same time, I could not bring myself to do it. It was going to take forever for me
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah.
And then one day I had this idea, because stage managers spend a lot of time timing things,
Yeah.
like down to seconds of, when the light cue is going to go with the sound cue, with the set moving, with the actor saying that one thing. And um, I decided to time myself cleaning the worst state of the kitchen I had seen in a long time. And it took me like 15, 20 minutes tops.
Yeah.
And that was only because we had used actually every dish in the house, because we'd had a bunch of people over like 3 times before we cleaned the kitchen.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, in my brain before, cleaning the kitchen was going to take hours. It was going to destroy my afternoon. And I'm like, I can give 15 minutes to the kitchen,
Yeah.
even when which also told me that when there was like 5 cups in the sink, it was not going to take me an hour to do all the dishes. And so I changed by adding more evidence. I changed the story, and now it's no big. I actually enjoy doing the dishes. But we also, I mean, time is malleable.
Yeah.
Our experience of time is malleable.
Yeah.
If you're waiting for somebody to show up, 10 minutes is
Very long.
ages.
Yeah. Yeah.
By the same token, when you were a kid, 30 minutes lasted about 4 hours.
Yeah.
When you were playing.
Yeah.
And so how we view time is also, or how we play with time is
Mhm.
also a, the story that we're telling
Yeah.
about how it moves.
And the possibility, you can put the music on and be in the kitchen together and have a conversation or sing along, or play
Mhm.
the new song that you heard, or this new crazy artist that I found, or whatever it is. But you can
Yeah.
create a play and a story within that, which brings connection,
Yes.
and suddenly the time and the effort is aside to what's happening, because there's more, and
Right.
deeper. Yeah.
Well, or even just, I mean, it's like the Taoist traditions of chop wood, carry water.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
it when my patients tell me, I really would like to meditate, but I don't have time. And I said, so meditate while you're folding laundry.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
um, and when we bring ourselves into that kind of practice, again, suddenly time does this. Suddenly the story
Right.
does this. Suddenly we have more space
Yeah.
to think and feel and that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
And I think in this world that we're living in now, to remove the devices, to put the phone down, to get out of that story, which pulls you in. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you can scroll away on
Yes.
whatever platform you're on for hours, and there's no connection, but time has
Right.
moved, you've disconnected. It's this whole, and someone else's story is now suddenly in your head, whoever
Right.
has done what, or
Yeah.
created drama, which is, I feel, quite powerful, to disconnect from those stories and to make your own, or to just be in your own.
Yeah. I mean, we need to know what's going on in the world, because then we'll be
Yeah,
surprised if it shows up
sometimes.
at our doorway, and
Yeah.
we, or we need to be able, if we are in a position of relative ease, or of privilege, that we need to be able to know what's happening to other people, so that we don't live in a bubble, so that we can help other folks, and so that we can use our resources to create community. Because I think that's also another thing um, about story has become a very individual habit,
Mm.
in some ways, in that um, people often used to congregate for storytelling, and there still are storytellers in the world, obviously.
Yeah.
Friend of mine actually is taken up storytelling professionally, um, and there's something about telling a story in a group,
Mm.
and having everybody hear the story, and then having everybody hear what they're hearing from their experience, being and then um what they what the person next to them heard and how it's different. I was aware. I've been thinking about that lately because one of the books that I'm reading right now, and I've forgotten the author's name. I just lost it. Hang on, I have to look it up. But the name of the book is Hospicing Modernity.
Yeah.
And the author says in the prologue, I'm going to tell you a bunch of stories in this book. And you need to be aware of the fact that the story you hear or the story you read is not necessarily the story I'm telling,
Yeah.
because of where I'm coming from and where you're coming from, which I thought was brilliant. But I need to
love
give her credit. So hold on
Yeah.
a second.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think this is something that we practice. I won't let you get away with it, so I'm waiting for you.
her name is Vanessa Machado de Oliveira,
Okay.
and I can give that to you, and you can put it in.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was a good reminder that stories have a life of their own, and they and the way they're passed and the way they change and the way they affect people is different.
And
Um,
so does conversation, so does us talking to each other. I from my perspective, and this is why I love dialogue so much, because in dialogue we take cognizance of the fact that I am hosting my own feelings as
yes.
to what you are bringing in, and there might be biases that I didn't realize, or there might be um, you know, treat whatever, but they're mine. And
Mhm.
I can address them if I can find a way to find the meaning that you're bringing instead of the emotion that I'm feeling or the whatever it is. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's one of the most damaging stories in the world right now, or
Mm.
in that I've experienced in my lifetime, is you made me feel blah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
Can't
actually,
make you
I was just moving my mouth and making
Yeah.
noises, and you decided that that's what this meant, you know.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that things aren't actually, that words can't be threatening or
Yeah.
intended to cause violence, but whether or not somebody accepts them or not, to some
Yeah.
degree, is
And
their
we need
prerogative.
to be aware that who the person is, to see
Sure.
each other, and to know that I come with no malice. So whatever is that you are taking from what I'm saying is not what I'm necessarily intending. And
Right.
and if it does cause harm, then address it with me. So to
Hmm.
be open and to speak with our hearts, I suppose,
Yeah.
is a good way for me to look at the world at the moment, because I can't
Sure.
take all the news and all the stuff because it's just overwhelming. And I think some of us just need to kind of go, okay, I'm here as a space, to be open to these kind of dialogues where
Mhm.
there is a heartfeltness to it, because we all just humans experience, or souls experiencing a human form in this
Right.
space at this moment, maybe.
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 And 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 I also think, though, that we need to be aware of how groups respond to a story versus individuals.
Mm,
I think a lot of the division that is happening in America right now is due to the fact that there are stories being told that people are being affected en masse with
mm,
the stories, and they not every story is a good story,
mm-mm,
and um and some stories, if a large enough group of people buy into a story that is not a good story, that is not big enough for everybody to live in,
mm.
it takes away. Um, it can actually cause physical and livability harm
Yeah.
to the people who aren't part of that story,
Yeah.
and that's so to say, storytelling is a. I mean, there's a whole thing. There's been a whole thing in recent years about storytelling and advertising.
Mm,
Um, but storytelling in general is a very, it's probably one of the most powerful things in the world.
It
And
is. Yeah.
you know, whether it's spoken or read or just carried,
Yeah.
it's being aware of the impact of stories, being aware of the impact of our word, and also being willing to take that to put down our sometimes I call it our responsibility hat, sometimes I call it our grown up responsibilities, but to meet each other of any age
Hmm.
as humans just trying to get from birth to death the best way we know how,
Hmm.
allows us to have space to not have perfect stories or to not have perfect behavior around each other, and to be able to address it in a way that's not hierarchical or othering or any of those things.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
and my son's my son, when he was very small, because I was raised by people that by the time I'm the youngest of six, and by the time I showed up, my parents were just talking to me like I was a full human, because they'd been through
We've
5
done
kids
this.
already, and and um and they'd had like 12 years between me and the next one, and so they were like, oh look, it's a small human, you know, as opposed to, oh, we have a baby, how do we do this, you know. and so as a result, when I had my son, I mean, I've just always talked to him like he's a full. And now, you know, I've had more. There are moments where I have more life experience, or I have to keep you
Yeah.
safe, or you just don't know about this situation, so I need to tell you.
Yeah.
But he would be around other people with their parents, and he'd be like, they don't talk to them like people, or you know, or those are really good parents because they talk to their kids like they're people, you know. And but I think that's true. But I think that's true on both ends of the human spectrum, because we don't gather in community the way that we used to,
Mm.
because age groups are siloed in a lot of ways, in our, at least in
Mm.
American culture. Kids aren't talked to like they're humans, but elderly people aren't either.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and people with disabilities aren't either, you know,
Mm.
and lots of other smaller group, you know,
Yeah.
racial divides and all sorts of things. And a lot of it has to do with not being exposed to their stories, not being exposed to the way that they're living their lives. And when I was really struck when I was a kid, because I grew up with various grandparents lived with us throughout my childhood,
Yeah.
and my grandmother, um, my friends would come over, and my grandmother walked with a walker, and she had a colostomy bag, and you know,
Yeah.
but she was smart as a tack, and she would. Yeah, she knew a billion stories, and she read lots of like National Geographic and science stuff and all sorts of things. And I don't. I have vivid memories of several of my friends being afraid of elderly people until they met my grandmother.
Oh, wow.
And it helped that every time I went to a birthday party, my grandmother also sent a gift. But I was like, how do you not grow up with old people? I don't understand, you know, because
Well, yeah.
also being younger, my parents were older, and so my parents were the age of some of their grandparents, and so I was like, how do you not navigate old people? All I do is live with old people. Um, but um, but I think we don't, at least in American culture, we have a story when we're little about what we want to be when we're a big kid.
Yeah.
And then when we're a big kid, we have a story about what we want to be when we're a teenager. And
Mm.
then when we're a teenager, we have a story about what we want to be when we're an adult and we're out of our parents' house.
Yeah.
And then maybe we have one about our job, and maybe we have one about a relationship or about having a family. And then we stop deciding. We stop thinking, this is the kind of person I want to be in
Mm.
midlife, or as a leader in the community, or as a, you know, or this is the type, and we don't have one about, this is the type of elder I want to be.
Yeah.
And those stories are important, and people used to
Very,
have those stories.
very important. And I think very much, we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago around the wise woman, you know, the woman in a community, in a culture, has been, there was no stories anymore, where now cultures everybody is separated. Like we grew up around fires and talking
Yeah.
stories, and of all ages, from babies to elderly people. It doesn't matter, because that's a communal space. You have weekends where you get together, and those things are important for us as societies to experience each other in different phases of our lives, so that we can have those stories about ourselves, maybe.
Hmm. Well, and but the guy that the big black man that went, that was like a musician, that went and made friends with all the um or a lot of the leaders in the KKK movement.
Oh yeah.
And he came and was like, he part of what I say that happened was he came and shared stories with what it meant to be him and what it meant to be them, and how, and he has a closet full of of their robes, because they would leave the organization.
Daryl
um
Davis.
that's it, thank you.
It's
That's but he but Daryl Davis is one of my patron saints because of his ability to walk into a situation that was very, quite possibly life threatening for him,
Yeah. Well,
to tell,
scary as hell. I
yeah,
mean, like, what?
to tell his story to people who outwardly expressed hate for people like him,
Mm.
and to, through conversation,
Mm-hmm.
through an exchange of life experience stories with
Mm-hmm.
each other, it changed things and it made the circle bigger.
Yeah.
Well, but again, they're in a story.
Yeah.
They're in a story of fear and threat
Yeah.
and protecting people that they love, and
Mm.
that part's understandable,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Um, but also too, we never know we never know whether what we say or a piece of a story that we drop with somebody, how it will change things.
Yeah.
I have a friend who, I he was a he's like 3 years younger than me. We were in high school together and in marching band together, and we went to church together. And at some point on some choir trip, I said to him, in being the self-absorbed teenager that I was, I just said stuff, and
Yeah.
I had no idea what I was, that I was making a big difference. But I said to him, never apologize for who you are. And he knew at a very young age that he was gay.
Mm.
And when I told him that, it made a huge impact.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this until decades later, when we were in our 30s.
Yeah.
And he found, and he found me online, and he's like, I think about you every Pride weekend,
Oh, that's
because,
amazing.
and I'm like, what? I was like, I couldn't get out of my own navel at that point in my life. I said something like, "Are you sure that was me?" You know,
Take it.
I mean, I would have said that now, but really, me, like, whatever it was, 15, you know, um, which comes back to the words that we choose, the stories that we tell matter, if
Yeah.
not to us,
Yeah.
to to the
Whoever
person
needs
hearing
to
them.
hear them. Yeah.
Somebody, I could have said that to somebody else
Yeah.
who was already, I could have said that to somebody else who was gay, who was already secure in who they were, and they're like, yeah, I know that already.
Yeah.
But because that landed that way with him,
Mm.
it's like my when I was in elementary school, I had a a friend of mine's mom was one of our teachers, and we were talking about something, and she just, I made some pronouncement of something that I had learned, and she looked at me and she said, Janice, don't believe everything you read. And it had never occurred to me. I'm like, what are you talking about? If people put it in print, it's
Must
real,
be
it's
true.
solid, it's 3-dimensional, it is true.
Yeah.
And it may, I mean, to this day, it makes a huge difference in the
Oh
way
yeah.
I move. And it was one sentence,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. No, it's and that's connection though, what you take from it, and how you host it. It's a
Yep.
perfect place for us to kind of go full circle as to, yeah, make play and find the stories and the words that you want your life to feel like. I think,
Yeah.
um, and find Janice online website where I've seen you can also get from there to your audios to Calm Amidst the Storm and to Once Upon a Time, and I really recommend them. They're amazing. And then obviously distant distance mind body integration. Distance mind body integration
I
is
know. I need to come up with a better name. It's too clunky.
yeah, but it really it puts it into a feeling almost. It integrates things without the story almost.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what I love about this work that you do is that it's almost distancing yourself from the story and integrating the mind and the body to to moving forward
Mhm.
outside of that story and into integrated being, if
Yeah.
that's
Well, I mean, what back to what we used to do,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Or back to if we weren't ever in a situation where we cognitively remember being
yeah,
like that, it still gives us a chance to we're still aware that something's not there,
yeah,
right? And so it leads breadcrumbs in that direction.
yeah.
Uh,
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me as always. I have missed you and I love chatting to you. I could chat to you for hours and days and years and months and all of it together because time
yes,
isn't linear.
it's true.
So thank you so much.
Mhm.
And
Thank
yeah,
you.
we will chat again soon.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt.